Good morning. So today, well, it's almost afternoon, but today brings me to quite a nice wild place, and there is a mine. Of course there's a mine somewhere, but the mine is actually up the hill. So, well, I think it's a mountain. It's about 700 meters high, so it's a bit of a climb. And yeah, in the first place though, we're gonna have to traverse this little foresty bit, so you never know, we might be able to find some mushrooms as well, which is quite exciting. But yeah, it's going to be a bit of a trek, and then hopefully once we get to the top it's going to be a little bit more chilled out. Well, I say that, it might be boggy, but let's just have a look. There's no shortage of moss in here, that's for sure. Really bouncy. Love it. So if you don't like mushrooms, just close your eyes, shut your ears for a little bit, because I've got something to show you, those of you who are interested. So if you look over there, there, and there, and there, and there, each stump and all the stumps over there, they're covered in mushrooms. I'll tell you about them. They are honey fungus. So they normally have these little scales, you can see, and like a little bit of a skirt. They are actually edible, although there's a few types of honey fungus. This particular type isn't as good for eating. Some people don't tolerate it that well. Now, it's likely that this fungus, so the mycelium, which is the network, the actual fungus that grows underground, this is probably the same fungus. So all these fruiting bodies that you can see, they spread. Look, they're even spreading underground where there's probably tree roots, because unfortunately honey fungus is very invasive and it parasitizes off trees, the roots and the trunk, and essentially once honey fungus takes over, the tree dies. So not many mushrooms are bad guys, but this one is. Most mushrooms actually help trees, and they share nutrients and water, so it's always a mycorrhizal relationship. So it's together, it's sort of like a symbiosis, but not honey fungus, I'm afraid. So that is that. Okay, onwards and upwards. So from here I can see a little bit better where I need to climb, and it's a little bit high. That's serious business in there, so I don't know if this is going to take a little bit longer than I thought, but never mind, let's keep going. The view of the mountain opens up here really beautifully over there. Yeah, focus a bit better, but anyway, there's actually a path, so because I sort of need to take that direction as opposed to straight up there, so let's hope this isn't going to be too overgrown. A little bit of water, but it looks quite good. It really opens up here, so at least now I can see where I'm going. Great. So the woods are now firmly behind me, and onwards and upwards. I can sort of see a little bit better where I need to go now. Round about maybe there. So now that we're getting a little bit closer, I've actually got a tale to tell you about this mine. So it's a very interesting history, because in about 1770, so 18th century, so quite a while ago, a bit older than the other mines that we come across with, there was actually a Mrs. Baker. She was English, so she lived in London, Elizabeth Baker, and she somehow came into the papers to this mine, to the patent, as they would call it, to the mine, and she actually set off then to live in Wales, in Dolgellau, and she was obviously very, very interested to see this mine thrive, and she wrote accounts of how she would travel up this mountain on I think on a pony or a mule of some sort. She would be travelling up, and the rain would be raining on her, and up until the skirts would be so wet that they couldn't soak up any more water. So yeah, she was one brave lady But unfortunately the mine didn't come to any success in the 18th century. At the time they were mining, well, they were looking to mine copper back then, but it didn't really come to anything. She does then write in her memoirs quite a bit about other aspects of life in the 18th century Wales and Meirionydd, and it's worth a read. But anyway, let's see what we can find, and then once we're up there, I'll tell you the other history of how the mine was then worked a little bit later for other minerals. I can see some spoil heaps over there, so that's where I want to go and check out. Ah, there's a few sheep. Hello, you've been lost. Oh dear. That looks like there could be one over there. I know some of these levels are older than others, and some of them are completely run in. But that's a big spoil heap there, so you know, if this one leads nowhere, then that one definitely is hiding something. Up the steep slope. Huge chunks. Right, this one is an open level, or is that a bit of an inclined shaft actually? Huh. I think it's an inclined shaft, or is it just a very flooded level? Interesting. Yeah, no, it's a flooded level. I'll shine my torch in a sec. Oh no, this one is a dead end. Or it might be a flooded winds as well. I might just blasted with the torch for a little bit, but it really is hard to tell. I mean, I'm leaning towards maybe that this is some kind of a flooded shaft. Winds, maybe you would call it, but yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm gonna go and check. Come on. But yeah, it sort of goes like it drops off there, so you'd think that they didn't just go in that far and stopped, although that's not uncommon. And the rock looks like it's really hard here, so not easy going. But judging by the spoil heap, you know, this didn't come from this little bit, so clearly it's come from somewhere. But anyway, let's go and check the other ones. So this is the bigger spoil heap, and there's also a structure of some sort, so this is promising. There's again, we can see that it looks like some kind of a cut, so my hope is that it doesn't hide it. And what's this little structure? It's quite small. Yeah, unless this is something to do with processing of something, but yeah. So anyway, I think I'm too distracted by this level to really be talking about this structure or anything else. But before we go in, let's have a look at this weird, I mean, they call it a causeway, almost like you could walk along it and get to somewhere, but actually once you've walked along it, it goes nowhere. So no one really knows why they built this little causeway, because it's a substantial structure. It's almost like you'd build like an incline. It's just that they go somewhere. This one goes absolutely nowhere. You can see that, you know, it's man-made and fairly substantial. Whether they were doing open cuts, sort of checking what the rock was like at some point, it just seems to be a little bit too. It's just, I don't know. It's too big and too obvious. But yeah, no one really knows to date. Well, without further ado, let's have a look what's inside. It's quite mossy, well, not mossy, lichen maybe. But yeah, so it's really muddy, so I think I'm going to have to go quite slowly. So I'm not going to film as I struggled. I think you've seen my struggles in other videos. how I have to carefully float above this mud, which is not too bad because there's some boulders I can stand on, well, like stones, bits of rubble maybe. Ooh, sorry about that. So yeah, so I'm not going to film my struggles, but do you see over there? There's a bit of stacked material along the wall, so that would have been by the miners. And this level, by the way, so where I was talking about Elizabeth Baker, this probably would have been her levels. So this is believed to be quite an old level, so 18th century. Normally when we explore these mines, lots of them are from the 19th century, so sort of 1850s and onwards. But this one is actually of considerable age. So let's have a look what's further inside. Well, so the sad news about this one is that I did go in. I went in sort of just past where that material is stacked. The mud was, it was literally, I was finding little stones to stand on and went in as far as I could, but it really is not really traversable. Maybe a little bit early, actually. I'm kicking myself now because just in summer, you know, in the sort of drier time, this would have been okay. But obviously there's quite a bit of water coming through, and with the recent rain, it doesn't help. So, well, I have to come back in summer. But yeah, the mud is absolutely hideous. It's full of God knows what. I don't want to dislodge any weird material. So yeah, we're just gonna have to peek inside. I did have a peek inside, and it does actually dry up. So as I was in sort of a bit further in there, it does dry up, but it's just too, you know, I don't want to get stuck somewhere in the middle of the mud. But yeah, this does look like quite an old level. Hey ho, never mind. It's a good lunch spot, this little structure. Shelters me from the wind, and the edge is just there, so it's all very nice. And just so you can see, that's how deep the mud was. So I'm not making this up, and you know, just to set the record straight, you gotta know where to stop. That wasn't okay. So yeah, that's why it didn't happen. But never mind. Let's see what else is there in this beautiful location. So because this location is so remote and there's really no other human activity other than just, well, sheep farming and mining, so whenever I see some kind of a man-made structure, I think, okay, well, if there's a level, it might be there. Plus the maps, those help. Yeah. Ooh. There's a stream somewhere underground, so that's really weird. Can you hear that? It's quite scary because you think, is there a level underground? Oh, that's really weird. But yeah, there's some open cuts there, so let's have a look what we can find over there. There's definitely an open cut in that rock in there. And this is hard to tell what this, I think this is actually just maybe it's just a spoil heap. I thought this was a deliberate structure because it seemed to have some, just looking from the side, it looked like it had been built. But I think it's just a spoil heap, which is really good because that would suggest there's a level there and you can see the channel of it. So let's see if we can get in, or at least have a look at the structure of it. Yeah, how curious. Just need to skirt past it because it's quite steep. I wonder if this is because it's collapsed or whether it's more like a shaft. Ah, I think it's just because it's really sort of half collapsed and just really, really flooded. I'm going to shine a torch in there anyway just to see what's in there, but it just looks like it kind of really has seen better days. Ah, well that's better with a torch. Yeah, so yeah, it's just really, really flooded. I can't even walk, I don't think there's anything sort of like shaft-like. I think it's just the level itself. It's obviously slightly run in, because all of this would have been open. So what I'm now sitting on, this would have been open, and obviously this would have been draining nicely. I guess, you know, a day with a good shovel would do to sort this out. But yeah, well, I can sort of take you in there. Let me see. And yeah, so you can see where it just sort of floods. Does it bend around there? Yeah, really hard to tell. Huh. Yeah, it's completely flooded, and that kind of makes me think, you know, maybe there was a winds there, so maybe that's why it doesn't, because levels are built to drain, so normally it wouldn't be that bad. But this one, yeah, so I don't know the particular structure of it. Why is it that bad? But that's this one. I like this. I like the look of this. Why? Because it's a spoil heap. It's always a hope that maybe there's an open level. Yeah, there's quite a bit of material actually behind it as well. So this is where I'm going to tell you when I catch my breath. This is where I'm going to tell you about what happened here later. So Mrs. Baker, she was unsuccessful, and she actually wasted all her life savings, all the money that she had on those old levels that I showed you before, the muddy one. She ran out of money. She had a few investors in London, and eventually all the money ran out, and that's when her venture ended. So she died, I think, in 1789, if I'm right. But she actually, you know, it could have gone two ways. She could have become a very rich mine owner, you know, great success. But no, her later days, when the mining operation was wrapped up, she then lived in poverty. She still wrote her memoirs, so she actually, there's some really, really good memoirs where she documented what life was like in Dolgellau, that time of sort of that during that period. But yeah, it's quite sad, really. And she never learned to speak Welsh, and obviously back in the day, Welsh would have been primary language, you know, way more than today, even in this part of Wales. So yeah, so that was probably one of the things then. She pretty much lived out of just people's kindness in her last days. And yeah, so she lived and died in poverty in the end. But you know, she had that sense of adventure, and she didn't want to give up, which I think is great. So then later, nothing to do with Elizabeth Baker, but then later in the 19th century, and probably into early 20th century, maybe up until sort of like 1910 or however late that would have been, these mines were then also exploited for things like iron, magnetite. Well, so there's two things. So one is magnetite, which is sort of like a ferrous material, which is then used for you know, to extract iron. And the other one is oolitic ironstone, which that word oolitic, it just means, I think it's from Latin, it just means that it would have been sort of, the entire rock is formed from little, almost like egg-shaped tiny little grains, and that's where the name comes from. So this wasn't copper eventually that they exploited, because clearly she didn't find any copper, so I don't think anyone was brave enough to say, yeah, we're gonna go in and look for copper again. But obviously they sussed out that this, you know, this land still had something to be mined, and this is where they were mining iron. But obviously, you know, being so inaccessible and so remote, this wasn't easy going, and it's actually quite extraordinary how they were still mining things up here that high up. Pretty crazy when you think about that. But well, people were very people would persevere, and also the cost of labour was just so cheap back in the day, which is quite sad. Obviously, we know about the history and how people were treated. So let's have a look what's in that massive open cut, or whatever that is. That looks a little bit scary. Let's see. Ooh, completely sheltered in here. I said it was scary, but actually it's a bit of an anticlimax, this one. What's that? Is there a bit of a... is that a shaft? Was it a shaft? Maybe it was a shaft. It doesn't even look like it was a shaft there. I guess maybe this was a run-in level here. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's where it would have been. Oh, that's funny. So it goes, you see, it goes round, but then it doesn't actually, it's like a shelter almost. And this looks like it's hard ground, so it's not even a shaft. I don't even know what this is. Peek hole through. That's quite interesting. So this, I don't know, I guess either there was some kind of an adit in here and it's completely run in, or they were just actually mining this as an open cut, which is always a possibility. It just doesn't seem then big enough if it was to be an open cut. And this is that same peeking hole from the outside. Again, you'd think, well, this is an adit. And then if you worked really hard all day to open it, you would just realize that it leads to the same place. Yeah, so it's almost like a mound with loads of cuts going around it. Here's the actual mountain, and there's another little structure, but again, tiny. God knows what they were using this one for. Really, really tiny. Maybe we'll just store explosives. Oh, well, this is worth a mention just before I go back. So where the ground has fallen, sort of eroded a little bit, slumped a little bit, you can see it's exposed the really peaty soil. It's probably just pure peat. Yeah, interesting. Just on my way back, still on top of the mountain, I found this, what looks like an old bit of rail. I don't know why it's here. I guess they obviously would have built some kind of tracks, but I guess maybe someone carried it over here. And to be fair, I don't even know how they carry any ore that they would mine, how they would actually remove it off the mountain. Maybe just on, you know, ponies, horses, because there was no known tramway that was built here. So yeah, food for thought. Okay, well, goodbye little mine. And there's the view of the mountain, and I'm gonna go back there through the woods and back. Well, it's been a good explore, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.